Good evening. Premier Bill Vander Zalm is going to be on tonight, and one thing I want to establish with him clearly as possible is whether or not we're going to go to war with Ottawa. But first, here's Ted with the rundown.
Is the convenience of plastic money worth the interest rates they charge? Tonight, with an explanation, two experts representing Visa and MasterCard. They're coming up with Webster. But first, his triumphal tour of Europe complete, our very own singing premier is back to business in BC.
Zie, ginds komt de stoomboot uit Spanje weer aan. Hij brengt ons Sint-Nicolaas, ik zie hem al staan.
Bill Vander Zalm is up first with Webster.
And tell me, sir, do you have the decency to blush after that abominable rendition of something or other?
I thought it was great, Jack. Hello, how are you? Good to talk to you.
Have you sold any cassettes yet?
No, not yet, but I'm sure there will be some demand for them, although most of it has been done in Dutch or some Dutch dialect, so it may not go over that great here.
Now, maybe I owe you a little bit of an apology. Tell me it isn't true that you indicated in any way that Vancouver should have a red light district.
That's true. I did not indicate that.
He said something which caused me to say his mind's in fantasy land, because you know as well as I do that that ghetto in Amsterdam is repulsive, horrible, disgusting, and dreadful.
Well, obviously in Amsterdam, it seems to fit into the scenery. There's a lot of things in Amsterdam I didn't particularly like. However, I was asked about this at the time, and I said, look, it may be what they see as the solution in Amsterdam, but the people of Vancouver would not go for it. And how the story got out of hand the way it did, the reporter for the paper said, you know, he was there and he apologized. The reporter for the radio apologized as to how it came out. But no hard feelings. It just somehow got lost in the travels, I guess.
That's right. I think maybe you should make a resolution not to mention SEX in any way, shape, or form for the next 5 or 6 months.
Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't seem to matter much. It seems to be on the media every day anyway.
We always get a little hint from you, however, but forgive me, too, if I misinterpreted you. Now, let's get down to business. What hard words did you have for Prime Minister Mulroney today, and what hard words did he have for you?
Well, I spoke to the Prime Minister today, and I told him that certainly there was a great deal of concern here in British Columbia about the SkyTrain issue, the financing of SkyTrain, about the International Banking Center and what could happen there, or what at least has been reported to be the concern of the head of the Committee of the Commons. And I told him about our concern with respect to the Polar 8 and the rumblings or the suggestions that we might be seeing again a further deal where Ottawa is going to cut Taiwan exports of textiles, and they're going to come back at us by cutting down on their coal purchases. So we make jobs in Quebec and Ontario, or we protect them at the cost of BC.
And you got
I told him about all of this, and we agreed that we would meet for 2 hours on March the 6th, and we'll go over all of the issues, and hopefully, as I put it to him, we might, between us, develop some sort of strategy that will be of benefit to British Columbia as well as Canada.
First, one thing at a time. Therefore, your attempt, which Michael Wilson's people thought was a bit slippery to get these tax-free units of ALRT, is dead in the water, finished, complete.
I'm afraid that's dead, although I will discuss it with him because, you know, it was obviously put to Michael Wilson, we're now told, although no one here had knowledge of it, about a year ago. So the legislation was there, the legislation was left as it was then. It was apparently used by Petrocan, by Genstar, and some other people. I'm told it was used in or by Quebec, but when it came to British Columbia, the threat was there to introduce retroactive legislation.
I can understand.
And that's no way of dealing with a province. And secondly, if they're so concerned about us getting a tax benefit, the people of BC, why should they be? It's the same people in this country. It's money to finance SkyTrain. It comes from out of country, or it's people here investing in their country. It's good for everybody.
But the fact remains is that, and I'm not particularly enamored with their position, but if every province found a way, and I'm told the Genstar and Petrocan and Manitoba things were different, to issue tax-free bonds that would take an incredible bite out of Wilson's revenue, because every bite you were taking was taking bite, if you got away with it, taking bite out of provincial income tax and federal income tax. You would agree with that?
Well, it would take a bite out of federal income
And
tax, I
provincial.
suppose, and provincial in the sense that they wouldn't be paying it. But, you know, it's money going to sources that otherwise wouldn't be investing here. It's money going to people that are living here who will in turn put the money back into the economy. So really there's no loss. But in actual fact, the provision was there. And we simply said, okay, look, it's a good provision to provide us financing at cheap costs. The money stays in the country. There was no excuse for them to threaten retroactive legislation as far as I'm concerned.
It's dead now in the water anyway.
It's dead?
Now, there's been a lot of confusion, and I first asked you some weeks or months ago about how much of your additional revenue you put into forestry, but it was kind of perturbing to see you contradict Jack Kempfin saying, what does he know what he's talking about? He's not even on the Treasury Board. Since then, Cuvalier has told me that money will be available on the air, money will be available for some forestry work. And can you give us that guarantee now that you will be putting in 20 or 30 million into essential forestry rehabilitation of what Carney called our silviculture slum?
Well, I think that was a bit of an overstatement, to say the least, by the federal minister. However, we will have the largest silviculture and tree planting program in the history of the province, no doubt the largest in North America. Again, though, there's only so much you can reasonably manage. You can't suddenly say we're going to plant X number of trees and take anything that comes. You've got to have the right kind of stock. Some trees grow into marketable size in 50 years, others take 80 years, and they're the same little seedlings. It's a matter of strain.
Now, you've been in power now since last August.
Yes.
And here we are getting in the middle of February.
Yes.
The people of British Columbia have yet to see a recognizable strategy or program or target for jobs. Unemployment now is over 13%. Are you going to have anything in the way of a strategy to create jobs in this disastrous winter for British Columbia? Or are you just going to tell me the engines of small business?
No, we're going to certainly depend a great deal on small business. We're also looking at some fairly major ventures, but by and large, much of this will come to the fore during the throne speech and the budget speech, and all of that is a month or less away. So we're working on it, but things are happening. It's not fair to say that things aren't happening. We've seen, I think, what has probably been one of the best proposals for the Peace River country in the ethanol plant, from which the protein will go to a meat processing plant in the Prince George area,
Right.
all of which creates a lot of work and activity for farmers and ranchers in the North Country. We know of several projects to be announced, again in the North Country, with respect to forestry, very, very major, and providing job security and new job opportunities for people there. And there's a lot of interest and a lot of activity and a lot of negotiation taking place now for various activities in other parts of BC as well. Things are happening. They're on the up. We're really beginning to move.
When you were in Europe, you talked about some kind of cattle plant. I forget what you call these things.
Well, I call it a meat processing plant.
A meat processing
Yeah.
plant. Did you offer any any financial assistance for these people to come here and establish?
No, not at all, except to say the farmers of the area, probably about 1,500 of them, will need to raise almost immediately something like 2,000 beef per week throughout the whole of the year and 5,000 hogs per week throughout the whole of the year. We may have to provide some sort of a guarantee or some sort of help to get the farmers started. But, you know, it's a lot better doing that than providing some sort of a guaranteed income assurance plan or subsidy to farmers to do basically much less than what they might be doing if they could be involved productively.
You'll remember the NDP had a very healthy subsidy for cattle ranchers. And if you do it up in the Peace, you'll have to do it throughout the province. You might be digging a big hole for yourself.
Well, we're getting away from this sort of, we'll subsidize and we'll pay for this and we'll provide or guarantee or ensure. We're getting away from that, and instead we're providing a climate, an opportunity, and an infrastructure that'll make it possible for these people to really make things happen in the way they like to do it, to grab the fork and get on with it.
You mean pick up a shovel?
Well, okay, that's a good term. I like it.
Now, you can tell me now, I'm sure, because the people of British Columbia felt they were double-crossed by your predecessor, Bill Bennett, when he had a wonderful election campaign and then zapped us with restraint. Are you going to have to cut health and our welfare and our education because of your close to $1 billion deficit as you plan the budget?
Well, we've got real budgetary problems. There's no question about that. We don't have the revenues as yet. We're working to improve the economy to get those sorts of revenues. In the meantime, obviously, too, we're looking at potentially a considerable deficit. However, there will be changes to provide better protection for people on lower incomes, and we're not in any way wanting to cut at this time because this is not a good time to cut. We want to instead provide the impetus, the drive that'll make the economy move.
Good, but you won't be hesitant about borrowing a few $100 million more, will you?
Well, don't forget, though, that whenever we borrow $1 billion, we're faced with $100 million in interest forever until we pay it off at least. So we don't want to go into debt any more than we have to because that places a burden on the people and on the programs that's always with us. Well, and if we simply spent and didn't consider where the revenues were coming from, pretty soon all of the monies would be going in interest to the boys in New York.
Sure enough, but you didn't tell me there were going to be any cuts, did you?
I didn't tell you that.
Will there be any cuts?
I can't tell you about the budget now, except to say I'm pretty optimistic about the whole thing.
Okay, one other question. Chester Johnson finishes February 28th, I think it is. Who's the new chairman of BC Hydro going to be?
I can't tell you yet, although I will tell you that we're looking at 3 or 4 people that we believe would do a good job in that area. I need somebody who's a good, tough, financial type and who can really keep a tight rein on the operation of that Crown Corporation, as we need to do with every Crown Corporation if we're going to keep them.
Have at Premier Bill Vander Zalm of the province of British Columbia, who will not sing to you, but will answer your questions after the break. I gather, Mr. Premier, that you're meeting Mr. Mulroney in Ottawa on March the 6th.
Yes, Jack, I'm meeting him in Ottawa on March the 6th. I'm coming back after that meeting, and then I'm meeting him again and all of the First Ministers on March the 12th, again in Ottawa.
Mm-hmm. The climate's a bit edgy with Mulroney. Did you have nasty words today?
Well, not nasty words, but certainly I put it as strongly as I could, squarely, and he knows what the concern here, and I'm sure that he's kept up to date as to what the feelings here in any event. And what we're facing in BC is probably not anything new. It's perhaps being brought out a bit more than what it was in the past, and maybe in some respects because governments are involved in many more of these sort of industrial assistance programs, and we're not getting our share. It's becoming more obvious.
Go ahead to Premier Vander Zalm.
Hello, Mr. Premier Bill Vander Zalm.
Yes.
You're probably tired of hearing this question by now, but in the past 6 months of your power in this province, I really haven't seen much change in the job situation in this province.
Well, he just gave us a long answer on that, but you didn't tell us much because the economy's so bad.
Well, I don't think you can turn things around in a matter of months. Unfortunately, it's taken some time to get the way it is, and you can't suddenly turn things around. If you're seeking to get investment from other areas, as I did when I was in Europe and as I've done in talking to people from Japan and Hong Kong and other places, it doesn't happen overnight or all at once.
Do you think you'll have to change the labor code to make it easier for employers, say on picketing or on double-breasting? Would that help you? Is that part of your strategy?
Well, we're certainly addressing the labor code. The minister has been traveling the province. He'll be reporting to Cabinet tomorrow, and we'll certainly look at that. And there will be changes, and if some of those changes will make it more reasonable and more equitable and more fair for all parties, labor, management, entrepreneurs, great.
Yeah, but of course that was a good move they made at Vancouver City Hall, in your opinion, was it not? And wiping out the restrictive bidding for city contracts so that it had to be union on all bids.
Well, I don't think it should be union on all bids. I don't disagree with them providing that opportunity to all people and making it a fair process. I don't have any argument with that.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Premier, I have a little. I'm a little disturbed when you described this SkyTrain financing. You said that apparently certain people were allowed to do this type of financing. When you say apparently, you don't sound too sure of yourself. And you also said that people were concerned about the financing. Well, people were concerned in 1980 when you, as the Minister of Municipal Affairs, imposed that system on the Lower Mainland, and now we have the mayors of Burnaby and Coquitlam and Port Coquitlam, Vancouver, trying to figure out exactly how we're going to pay for that with the balloon-type mortgage, which you introduced as part of the financing package back in 1980. The existing line, not counting the bridge to Surrey and everything else, is going to end up costing us over $4 billion. Don't you think it's a little late in the game, 7 years down the road, to try to devise a tax dodge to get...
Okay, sorry, we got you. Let's have the answer.
Well, I'm glad he's not the Minister of Finance because obviously his figures are way out. But having said that, number one, I think it's a wonderful system. No one wants to do away with the system. It's working very effectively. It's also quite costly, but I would guarantee you no other system would have cost less if you'd have considered overpasses and bridges as would have been needed regardless in what the system.
Am I still there?
Yeah, but
I had a comment today, Jack, on the style that the Premier has introduced, and it was described to me as ready, shoot, and aim. I don't think the Premier's got his handle on anything that's going on in this province.
Do you hear that? He says your style is ready, shoot, and aim.
Well, I don't procrastinate, if that's what he means, but at the same time, he's complaining about things taking too long. No, we'll get on with the job. If it's ready, shoot and aim, fine and dandy. We'll get on with the job.
Go ahead, please.
We're not going to be
just wondering, Mr. Vander Zalm, what we're going to be doing on the gambling. I think this idea of the cruise ship is very good, and what are the next step on gambling?
I can't tell you that. I can only tell you that we'll try it between Victoria and Seattle and see what the results of it and what the reaction and public opinion on this. But I think it'll probably be quite an attraction for the tourist in any event.
But you're not talking about special cruises in BC waters on BC ferries.
No,
you
definitely.
contradicted your Attorney General on that.
No, I guess perhaps what I did in coming back from my travel, wherever it was at the time, I think it was back to Ottawa, and I came back here and I was confronted with this.
Yeah.
And it was put to me as being gambling on the ferry, and I said, no, we're not having gambling on the ferry. And I believe this led to the confusion. So.
But it's going to be free enterprise, privately operated under a government commission, is that correct?
Yes, I would think so, that we'd have the private sector do it on contract somehow. But
go ahead, please, from Williams Lake.
I have a question about the BC Hydro Site C project. I think that it would be a very expensive project, and it would be much better to create a lot of sort of medium paying $10 to $15 an hour jobs as opposed to a few $30 or $40 an hour jobs that would only last for a few years up there.
I don't disagree with you on the job aspects. These larger mega projects don't provide really job security, and that they provide a lot of jobs for a time and then suddenly it's over. And if all of the people are then resident in the area, it can cause greater problems yet. But that's not the idea here. We're certainly aware that we've got a resource that should be developed. And if it means revenues for the people of British Columbia through the export of some of this...
But can we sell the power from, say, Revelstoke right now? I was under the impression that we couldn't sell it even.
No, we have a surplus as it is, you're right.
And they have a surplus too, and we were only getting offered half a cent a kilowatt hour. But
and we would not build any Site C unless we knew that it was going to be paid for by the purchaser over, say, a 20-25 year period.
Fair enough, Mr. Premier, but to build that dam, as W.A.C. Bennett did, you would have to give a 7-year no-strike contract with arbitrated wages. You'd really be caught in a bite of expense in that, because you must have a no-strike deal on a dam like that if you're building it for export to States.
I don't know that for sure. I'm sure that this might come up, but there's nothing to suggest that in fact this would be the case, even though it had been done once previously with some considerable success.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack. Yeah, Mr. Vander Zalm, I'm a single mom. I'm on welfare, but I am attending Douglas College for legal secretarial course.
Good for you.
My question to you is there going to be an increase in the welfare? Because it is hard to live on this money.
I'm sure it is, and I know, too, that as a matter of fact, I had a meeting today with a delegation, and we discussed this because there hasn't been an increase in welfare rates for a good while now. So this will be addressed by the Treasury Board, and they know it to be a priority. Just how much can be done, or when in fact it comes into effect, or what the amount, I don't know exactly.
Yes, well, there's lots of us that are on it. Like, I haven't been on very long.
No.
And I mean, at least I'm doing something to get off of welfare.
Good for you, and I hope you do very well. And I realize what you're saying about the inadequacies as far as the amount is concerned, and this certainly is something that Treasury Board will need to address.
I see you met with Sylvia Russell today about the food bank. Was she asking for cash grants for you, or are you going to give her any?
No, they're a very reasonable group, and they put forth a number of suggestions with respect to welfare rates, with respect to daycare rates and the opportunities there, or how it might better be provided. They put forth a position on housing for people on low incomes, on health care, all very good.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I was going to ask, when is the money going to be allotted for the Hastings-Cassiar tunnel?
You mean the overpass at Hastings and Cassiar?
Yeah, that's been asked for by the mayor of Vancouver in his meeting with me. And frankly, I haven't told him this yet, but I don't think there's too much opportunity in the budget from what I see it now, but who knows? I know it to be a priority with the city. They're pushing for it, but it's a hefty bill for the province, and I don't know whether that's a priority over, say, welfare rates or health care in some of those areas in need.
You're going to have a tough time in Treasury Board. Go ahead, please.
Yes, hi, Jack. Listen, Premier Vander Zalm, I don't have a question, but rather a statement. I feel that your ability to be open with the public is quite contrary to the normal stand that most politicians take, and I may not agree with most of you or some of your moral stands or otherwise, but your ability to make those stands for the people of the BC and otherwise to be able to read what you say and know that you are being honest about that is most appreciated, at least from my point of view. So I thank you.
Thank you. But if I can add a note of caution, we haven't really had a chance to test you yet because you haven't really done anything like, one, produce your first budget, two, produce your amendments to the Labour Code, if any, or produce your other job strategies, or even a firm position on the forestry industry and silviculture.
I agree with you. There's some real rocky times ahead. It's not going to be a smooth ride all of the time, and we're going to have to do some things that aren't going to sit well with some of the people, but they need doing, and, you know, we'll face that.
You'll take the heat even if you have to cut the coat according to your cloth.
I'm afraid we'll need to take certain moves or make certain moves that won't fit or suit all of the people.
My thanks to you, Premier Vander Zalm of British Columbia, and now that you've finished making Sinterklaas, you are back to full-time work. And no singing on the job.
No, listen, I'll tell you what, if that was singing on the job or a holiday, I don't want another one like it. I had 12 to 14 days of real hectic travel, a lot of work, and it wasn't a holiday by any means.
My thanks, Mr. Vander Zalm.
Thank you.
Good. I'll be back after the break. Thanks, Bill. It's a perfectly reasonable question, even if you don't have a miserable, mean Scotch background, to ask why, when you get your Visa statement or your MasterCard statement, you're paying 18.6% in Visa and 21% per annum on MasterCard. And even the House of Commons has wakened long enough to have the Finance Committee look at a lot of interest charges, not only the banks but other people. And tonight I've got two gentlemen here. Well, two bankers. Well, two gentlemen.
Thanks for
Earle Robertson, who's the manager for the Royal Bank of the Western Visa Centre, and a foreign newspaperman who went wrong by the name of Don Peacock, who's the public affairs manager for the Bank of Montreal. Now, gentlemen, on the face of it, with interest rates running at 7 1/4 for a 6% mortgage, or 10 or 11% for a personal loan, and the prime rate God knows what, it seems appalling that you people, knickers, you 18.6% and you people 21%. Am I not correct that it seems appalling?
Well, it may seem appalling, but it really isn't. If you look into the facts, there's really no comparison between the cost of a service like MasterCard and just a personal loan or the prime rate. And personal loans that you can get for 10 or 11% are dependent on a very high credit rating. More often, the smaller ones will run you 18 or 19%.
Do you get much of heat from the public on the fact that people look at their Visa statement, 18.6%?
Quite frankly, at this point, Jack, not nearly as much from the public as from the press.
And the House of Commons.
Yeah, no, they
Well, why
are looking into it quite seriously, but we average something in the neighborhood of 18,000 telephone calls, inquiries from our customers a month, another 3,000 letters. And I would say probably not 1% of those are dealing with concerns about interest rates. They're asking
Well, now what
questions
have there been?
about the charges.
I remember, first of all, when people couldn't get personal loans when these cards first came out, you couldn't get a personal loan, but you could always get a Visa card or a MasterCard, correct? Yeah. Why was that? That was so that they could borrow up to...
Well, I suppose partly it was trying to get the business off the ground, but the bank credit card is much more than just a loan. It's a very high convenience service for people. It's a handy way to shop. It's a handy way to keep track of records. It's a high cost in processing, administration. As far as the banks are concerned, those are some of the reasons why those interest rates are where they are. And finally, with MasterCard, at least, we don't have any fees. So if you pay off your monthly balance, you don't get charged any interest rate.
21% per annum interest, but no fees of any kind. That's on MasterCard.
No fees, no annual fees, no transaction fees.
What about Visa? What's the score on Visa?
It's 18.6% interest rate, Jack. We have a 15-cent transaction fee or $12 a year. You choose which you would prefer.
I can choose which I'd prefer. $12 a year if I'm going to use it a lot, 15 cents a year if I don't use it at all.
And quite frankly, a number of people who should choose $12 don't because they're optimists and they're not going to continue that as a purchase pattern, so they choose to continue to make the 15-cent one.
But relate that, surely. Surely this relates to the current interest rates in some way, or does it not relate?
Well, let's go back, Jack. I think we have to take back into perspective that when bank cards came into the country, they came in 1968. It was the Visa banks collectively that brought in Chargex, it was called in those days. The opening rate was 18%. And was from 1968 right through to 1980, and that was when prime was somewhere between 6 and about 11 or 12% as it floated in and out over that period of time. So we're really not doing anything different now than we've been doing as long as we've been around.
Some people might have been saying you've been getting away with murder.
That's entirely possible, but as we talked earlier, it's an exceedingly high-risk business. Just the authorization system that was put together for the Visa banks to be able to handle the volumes of transactions we've got now is an exceedingly multi-million-dollar operation.
All right, let me check that with you. You've got a higher rate, but you've got no transaction fee.
That's right.
And no minimum fee. But what about this business when it started? You were still charging a high interest rate, and the going rates were only, what, 6 to 11%, I think Earle said.
Well, when MasterCard got into the field, which was several years after Visa, the spread between prime and the interest charged on balances was roughly the same as it is today.
Now, but what about those times when interest rates went up to 21.75, 22%? Was your rate then above that?
No. At one point in time, Jack, our cost of funds was literally higher than the rate we were earning from our customers. I think it has to be kept in mind that this is a cyclical business as well. I've been involved fairly closely with it since 1971 now, and we're probably in the sixth real cycle that's happened, and 3 of them high and 3 of them low. And I think if somebody did a look across the average over those number of years, and I realize that's not a very nice thing for some people to think about doing, but you have to look at the business that way.
The fact remains is, as a MasterCard or a Visa user, as long as I pay my thing 21 days within the time of getting the bill, somebody else, I'm paying virtually nothing, even
You're paying
nothing.
The bank is giving you that service for free.
That's why we have introduced the transaction fee from our perspective, because when we, if you go back into the early 1970s, we had about 20% of our customers that paid their bill off in full every month, and we're getting, in effect, a free ride. It's now about 50-50, and we simply do not believe that anybody should get in and come into the system without paying some part of the cost of running the operation. And
but you'd say 50-50, so 50% get a free ride, 50%. I've heard some disaster stories about people who lose their jobs and live on their Visa cards.
Well, that happens a little bit, Jack, but by and large, the loan loss situation from Visa and the bank cards in Canada is the envy of the rest of the world.
How about yours? 50-50, would you say?
I think ours is a bit higher these days. I think around 60-40, 60% paid off every month. But the 40% who don't pay their their balances off every month kind of revolves also. So, you know, sometimes it's...
They use it as a, in fact, you used to flog it as a revolving credit.
Yes, basically.
Now, what about the merchants? If I'm a merchant, and obviously I like the use of your cards, can I take that to the bank and get instant money?
Yes.
Yes.
From both sides.
That's one of the advantages to merchants, is that, in effect, the banks are then putting up their credit for them and doing their collection and worrying about
Another
all that
question,
sort of
just
thing.
for out of sheer interest, does the percentage I pay as a merchant depend on my total transactions with the bank? Is that a negotiated fee?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's negotiated, and it depends both on the value of your total deposits and the size of your average ticket. If you're putting $200 transactions through instead of $10 transactions, you'll pay a lesser discount rate simply because
One
it's
other
less paper
question
to
that
process.
crossed my mind the other day, that in the States, some of the jurisdictions, like a particular state would say, you scoundrels with all your bank cards, we're going to knock you down to 10%. What do you do in a case like that? Can you give me the answer to that?
Well, what's happened in some cases is that some credit card operations have just been moved to states that had higher levels.
And in some others, what happens is that you look at your high-risk cardholders, and they simply aren't cardholders anymore. You can't afford, unless you have a reasonable level of profitability in the service, then you simply have to tighten up your front end.
But you don't mind people using the cards as revolving credit accounts? Because what's your average balance?
About $700.
Yours?
Ours is in the same vicinity, probably a little bit lower. The average, you mean the average unpaid balance?
Yeah, average unpaid balance.
I'm not sure what the average limit, I mean, the individual limits, it depends on individual
The
circumstances.
bulk of our limits run in a range of anywhere from $1,500 to $4,000. There's
Yes.
quite a number higher than that, but that's the range that they're in.
The normal ones.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if you'll get many questions about credit cards, but let's try it. Purely an information program tonight, after the break. I've got a Ganges credit union card where I can get American money in the States. You haven't got that, have you?
No, but we've got our banking machine cards that are certainly available in probably 5,000 banking establishments in the U.S. at this point in time.
How do you know which bank to go to?
There's our hookup is with a Plus system, and if the Plus
Yes.
decal's there or Interac in Canada, then you can go and use
Are
your
you
card.
the same?
Yes, we're hooked up to a similar sort of network across Canada and in the United States.
Everybody should spend cash if
Yeah.
they have it.
Well, this is a good way to get access to it.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, Mr. Peacock.
Yes.
2 years ago, we at Christmas time ran up an account of $1,800, and before the due date, we paid $1,600. We left $200, but at the end of the month, we're charged interest on the full $1,800, and this happens all the time.
Oh.
I don't understand that.
Oh, it does, though.
Well, it's very difficult for me to give you any specific answer unless I saw the details, but if you wanted to submit the details, I can give you a telephone number where we can...
Oh, I talked to them, and if you, this happens all the time. If you don't pay your full amount up, you're charged interest on the full amount that you pay, and we paid it before the due date.
Okay, hold on. How about you?
Well, I was just going to explain how the system works, because that literally what your agreement calls for is that if you do not pay in full, then the new transactions that appear in your statement for that month are charged from the day that the transaction appeared on your statement. In effect, they're considered like a cash advance. So
But that's not quite
he's
right.
correct.
But what he's...
But that's what your agreement says.
Yeah, I know, but that's not quite right. I know my agreement says that, but that's 99% of the people don't realize that.
But just a minute. Perhaps we're doing you a favor. Let me see if I've got it right. I charge $1,800, right?
Right.
And I pay off $1,600 before the due date. I leave a $200 balance.
Right.
On my bill, next time I get it, will be the full interest on the full $1,800 until I've cleared off the other $200.
That's absolutely right.
Well, certainly for the balance of that, no, just from the balance of that statement period, up until the date that you made the 16.
But that's in my contract.
Yes, sir.
And that's what I'm stuck with, and that's what you do.
Yep.
Thank you, sir. Knowledge is a wonderful thing. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Webster.
Yes.
Question for your guest. You've glanced over the 18% that a person is charged, or approximately. I have a small retail shop, pardon me, and I'm charged 4.5% on every transaction.
Right.
Quick calculation, we're up in the 20% range.
I'm sorry, I missed that. You charge 4.5%. In other words, when you take the receipts in, you get at less 4.5%.
That's right.
And what's your problem?
Well, it's not a real problem. I don't mind. You operate very well with the Visa or MasterCard. But you're saying that the interest rates are about 17, 18%.
Right.
That's being complained against. But on that very same transaction, I'm charged 4.5%. Now, to me, that sounds about 23%.
Oh, I see, 17.5% plus the commission to the salesman, right?
So you're only talking about one half of it.
Ah, yeah, good point.
Okay, so it's just I appreciate it's a great business. I'd love to get into it. But as a merchant, I need that Visa and MasterCard. And as a small merchant, my transactions are small. But there's no doubt about it that there's...
But it means you have no bad debts and your cash flow is always there.
Well, no, there's no bad debts, and I appreciate the use of the card. I'm just saying that the...
Yeah, you're at both sides of the story. That's a fair point. You collect from us and you collect from them.
If I could put it in perspective a little bit, Jack, the average bank card rate at a merchant facility across Canada would be just about 2% at this stage. The very small merchants who process very little volume through certainly pay higher, but the average is only about 2%, and there's a tremendous infrastructure that has to be in place to just run that side of the book.
Go ahead from Kelowna.
I understand there's an 18 to 21% charge monthly for overdue accounts. I'm sitting here with at least a 6-month credit for over $25. I've never received any interest at all. Why would they collect interest from me if I owe them and not pay it to me if they owe me?
First of all, let's say, do you concede, gentlemen, that if I have a credit balance with you, that you owe me interest on my deposit?
I'm not necessarily if it's a credit with MasterCard. If they want to sort of retrieve it and invest it in a savings account, of course, but...
No, it isn't a deposit account, Jack. It's not an interest-bearing
Gentlemen,
vehicle.
this happens to be a... God, if I can focus on this.
No, you've got it right. The fact is...
Personal line of credit, that's what it is.
What?
Personal line of credit, and it's from the MasterCard, Bank of Montreal.
Is that with a gold MasterCard?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I just don't quite follow the problem that you're talking about.
I thought you were talking about having a credit balance in your account and not getting interest on it.
Well, it basically is. It's a MasterCard, a gold MasterCard, and it was a personal line of credit, but...
You got to use it and pay it off.
Well, no. God, I gave them too much money 6 months ago.
I think you should just ask for it back.
But you should have asked for it back 5 months ago.
Yes, and invested it in something else.
Wouldn't it be automatically credited against my owings?
Not unless you ask for it, Jack. Like even with us in the credit card system, we try to, if a credit's been outstanding more than 3 months, we clear it out and send the customer a money order to get it back.
You send him a money order?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I have a credit account with a stockbroker, he's got to pay me interest on that, but yours not.
Well, this isn't a deposit account, and it isn't
Not
set
a
up that
deposit
way.
account. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes.
Mr. Webster?
Yes.
My question is actually to back up a little bit. The subject of the 18 to 21% interest charges, I don't feel the gentlemen, your guests tonight, have really justified how they get away with charging 18 to 21% interest.
They said they started that way in the 60s when the interest rates were low, 6 to 11%. They've maintained it up, and I think they would both tell me that it's the cost of the service.
Well, yes, and the gentleman also said that at one particular time they were losing money on it. Well, I don't think any of us just got off the banana truck. It's going to be a long, frosty winter until any of the banks in Canada are losing money and being involved in any projects that lose money.
Yeah, but
that's
that's not to say that banks don't lose money sometimes on some of the services, their individual services. And this is a very high cost, high convenience service. There's a cost of funds, which runs close to the prime rate at the moment for MasterCard. And there's a cost of processing and administration that runs another dozen or so points.
We were just checking some of the stores. The Sears, Eaton's, and the Bay are 28.8%.
Well, yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is to participate in anything. Rent a car, stay at a hotel, travel, whether it be on business or pleasure. Do anything these days, you need to have a credit card. So you feel like you're getting trapped. You have to have one to more or less conduct yourself out in the world at all, and you have to almost use it, because if you rent a car for a week, has $200, and then you get on top of that, you're getting charged with 18 to 22%.
You don't have to carry a balance.
And the gentleman justified, said, well, nobody complains. Well, it's like complaining to Revenue Canada. Nobody's going to listen.
Yeah, but you don't have to carry a balance, Earle was telling me just now. And furthermore, you don't have to carry the card if you don't want to live in the 20th century.
And you don't have to pay any interest if you pay up your balance every month, at MasterCard at least.
Well, I pay off my credit cards, but it's with the time frame. I have high limits on all of my credit cards. and I have yet to be able to beat the system, much like that previous caller who was complaining about the fact that he paid off his, $1,800 balance or paid $60.
Yeah.
He still got charged.
got-
It's a trap, and you're going
Well, now you know about the trap. I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to continue with my credit card people after the break. Just on a personal note, I was very annoyed at American Express when I was in Hawaii at Christmas. I hadn't taken any money with me, and I thought, well, I can go and get $1,000 in traveler's checks and $250 cash to start me off. And I was told, this is a Canadian card. Yeah. You can only get a total of the Canadian equivalent of $1,000.
Well, you should start using your MasterCard for our Instabank networks.
But is that a separate card?
No, it's the same card. And
in our case, we have a separate client card, but it's simply your vehicle into your bank account.
And if I go to the States, am I restricted to your limit in Canadian funds?
No, you're restricted to what's in your account.
In
your bank account.
Oh, you're talking about what's in the bank.
Yes, yes.
As distinct from a
no,
card.
but you can also get a cash advance from those machines, Jack, using your banking card.
But anyway,
up to the limit.
American Express holders are warned you'll only get the limit in Canadian funds, which in my case was $750 American. However, no complaints now. As long as I've said it on the air, I'm happy. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack. I don't blame the banks a bit. If a person's going out to make a bunch of major purchases, he should go to the bank and borrow money at 12%. All you have to do is pay off your balance every month, and I guess the other thing is that anyone can get one of these things, and obviously the default rate is going to be a lot higher than with normal loans.
What is your default rate?
At this point in time, it's not something we publish, but it's well under 50 basis points.
Oh yes, it's very, very small compared to the total number of transactions.
You mean with the economy as it is now, it's still very low?
I mean, it's big because the systems are big in terms of total dollar loss, but the Canadian system is the envy of the world, really, in terms of
If I finally welch on my card, you'll chase me, hound me, and garnish me.
Yes.
Very
Won't
seriously.
you?
Very seriously.
And they're not joking, even if they are smiling. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good evening. I just wanted to know what the maximum credit limit is on both cards.
It depends entirely on personal circumstances. It ranges from anywhere from $1,000 to $4,000.
Ours, we have limits a lot higher than that, but you have to have a demonstrated need. We have limits that are $25,000 to $35,000 for someone who really has a need for it, but we prefer not to have limits out that are there simply for status rather than for actual use requirements.
Oh, you mean like these platinum cards that you pay $250 a year for? Fair enough. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Webster. The question I have is, as a small merchant, if I have a bill for, say, $700 I collect from a customer, and I charge them $21 for tax, why do I have to pay the 3.5% on the tax as well?
Ha-ha! You got him.
That's
gold, nailed to the wall.
Well,
Is it correct?
That's money. You know, that's money that the bank has to put up, one way or the other.
It's money that's collected for the government.
But your contract with us is for the total amount of the purchase. I sympathize with your position, but first of all, we don't even look at the transactions to see what the difference is between the before and after tax added process. There wouldn't be any way in the system to even haul them out.
So it's $700, $21 tax, $721, and he takes it to the bank, and they take 4.5% off.
The only nice thing about it is that the customer brings it back and we have to reverse the entry, we give you your 3% back and the whole 721 again. So it works in reverse too.
If it comes back.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what it works out to is that basically you are charging interest on tax money collected.
Well, that's not interest to start with, sir. That's simply a discount rate for doing business through the system.
And that's in your contract. Read your contract.
That's the system. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Hi, I've dealt with both MasterCard and Visa. Visa, I have quit. I pay my balance every month. And one month I never received a bill. So the following month they sent me my bill plus interest, so I phoned them, and I had to pay the interest, even though I hadn't received the bill. They checked back that I had, made...
Okay, got lost in the mail.
Yeah, and so I had to pay the interest, so I no longer deal with Visa.
That'll teach them.
And MasterCard, I went to make my full payment 1 month on the due date, and it was 4 o'clock. The machines were down at 3:30, so therefore it wouldn't go on until the following Monday. He informed me I would be paying interest.
Some days you can't win.
So anyway, I phoned
At least
them
she's given you equal time. She doesn't like you for the 3:30 closing, and she doesn't like you because you didn't deliver
She's just said Visa. She didn't say Royal Bank Visa. I was going to ask her which Visa she
Oh,
was
yeah.
dealing with.
It was the Royal Bank Visa.
Okay, then
Say.
you do have
Go with-
equal time for both
So
of us.
you asked that
I
question.
deal with the MasterCard, but anyway, when I did get through to them at 8:30 Monday morning, they checked that it had gone through the machine, but I wouldn't have to pay the interest that.
Good. You won that one. She was going to go on forever. Go ahead, please.
Hi. I've noticed that on a lot of bills that we get from MasterCard we deal with, that one item is always left off from an earlier period of time, right? And then on the next bill, it'll appear on the next bill. So that, therefore, if the bill isn't paid by the due date, then the interest will start from the original item, which is about a month behind all the...
I've lost that. Does it make sense to you?
No.
Hey?
I think it works the other way around. You can sometimes get interest-free purchases for up to maybe 50 days if you happen to make the purchase.
21 and 30.
But when you make the transaction, it really has nothing to do with it. What you get billed for is actually what appears on your statement. And if it doesn't appear in your statement, it really doesn't matter whether you've made the purchase prior to that point.
I know, but it appears on my statement. But
No.
it's from a previous...
I've lost interest, and they say it's. Do you say it's not true?
I can't see it, Jack.
You can't see it. You can't see
I
it.
can't see how it works.
Let's be arbitrary. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I would like to know why there is no stop payment on Visa in Canada when there is in the States.
I'm not aware there is.
What
in
is
the
a
States.
stop payment, ma'am?
Well, if you write a check, if you charge something on your Visa and the goods is unsatisfactory and you take it back and you don't get satisfaction, you cannot put a stop payment on a Visa card.
But that's because the
like you could on a
transaction.
check.
That's because the transaction is in effect a contract between you and the merchant, not between you and the credit card.
And besides which, the check is a bill of exchange. A credit card purchase isn't. Your credit card purchase really is the same as buying in cash, but I am not aware that the U.S. system allows stop payments. I'm sure they don't.
I don't think so.
But is it not a good, if you've got an unsatisfactory item on Visa, which you are going to refuse to pay to Visa, you would pay the interest on it, but two, you could make a point of, can't we pressure Visa or you by saying, I'm not going to pay that, that was junk.
Well, there's all kinds of things that we get involved in, Jack.
That
But
often
the fact is the contract is still between the person selling the goods and the person buying the goods, and we're simply a payment medium that passes it on through.
Go ahead from Kelowna.
Yes, from Kelowna. What happens with a person that has lost their credibility through a receivership? They have a card and they want to use the card.
Any answer?
Are you talking about an account that you have now, sir, or are you
Oh,
thinking...
no, I'm not talking about, I'm talking about a client that I have, and I would like to find out, okay, what happens with them of getting a new card.
Well, in our case, we don't approve the approval or decline of the card in our center. We do through our branches, and if the branch came in and recommended...
Thank you very much indeed. Earle Robertson, Royal Bank Visa, and Don Peacock, Bank of Montreal MasterCard.
Thank you very much,
After the
Jack.
break. Tomorrow is budget day in Ottawa, so I'll have three experts here, Doug Hayhurst, Oksana Excel, and David Schreck, to see what we can explore from the budget, see what it means to you and me. The predictions are it'll be drab, but it might not be. At 5 p.m. precisely.